Hey guys, and we're back with part 4. Something I want to say real quick before I go further. I watched the second Twitch response, and I noticed someone say that I wasn't really refuting any of Matt's points as much as I was offering my own opinion or stance. And I want to set the record straight that I didn't start this response series to debunk or refute Matt. My goal here is simple. For a long time, I did not like The Legend of Korra. Too many things didn't sit right with me, and I've been waiting for someone to come along and point out that maybe there's more to the show than I was seeing. And quite often, when I have discussions about things like this, I either get people who don't really know what they're talking about, or people who just at me and tell me that I'm just a sexist bigot who can't appreciate a show with a female character. That's hilarious. But when I was watching Matt's videos, I noticed that he was making honestly good defensive points about the show, and I wanted to offer some counterpoints for those who either had watched his video or had not, because good discussion is how you learn new things, and I really wanted to just offer some different points. Look, I'm not here to debunk his videos. I'm not here looking for things to debunk. If I see something I don't agree with, I'll offer counterpoints. If I see something I do agree with, I will accept it and say, yes, I agree with this point. But I'm not here looking to fight Matt on anything. Please don't look at my reaction videos as debunking videos where I'm trying to disprove all of Matt's arguments. These are simply points and counterpoints being laid out, and you're free to do with them as you please. All right, now that that's out of the way, on with the video.
Sorry, what now?
At the South Pole, there is a portal that connects our world to the spirit world.
There's this major misconception in the Avatar community that The Legend of Korra's retcons somehow ruin the original series and create a ton of plot holes, and quite frankly, that's all bullshit. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that The Legend of Korra doesn't have retcons, because by definition, it certainly does. But these retcons are actually rather consistent with the original series, they don't create any major plot holes, and they by no means ruin either show.
Actually, I agree with this point entirely. Plot holes and retcons don't necessarily ruin a previous show. They simply hurt the credibility of the current show. For example, in Star Wars, if they suddenly established that Jedi had the power to fly with the Force, oh, hi, Rey, when did you get here? Then that would be a pretty big plot hole, since the Emperor, Mace Windu, and Yoda were all defeated by falling, and they could have flown. This doesn't hurt the movies with the Emperor, Mace Windu, or Yoda necessarily. It simply makes the movie in which the retcon happened look unimpressive and lacking in credibility, like the writers are making up things without explaining them properly. Plus, it's very easy to disconnect a turd from the body. Shit it down the toilet and flush it away. Sorry, went off on a bit of a Star Wars rant there. We were talking about Korra, but moving on.
Some people make retcons out to be a bad thing inherently, like expanding on the lore somehow ruins the lore we already had, but that is just straight up wrong. If you explain the magic with more magic, then the magic is not lost.
No, but it can be undermined. Look, I'll get to that. That's a good point, but I'll get to it later.
Even if The Legend of Korra's new bits of lore somehow did devalue or contradict the lore established by The Last Airbender, which it doesn't, it wouldn't matter, because the lore being inconsistent doesn't make the story automatically bad by proxy, as the storytelling itself is not affected by the lore's inconsistency. All of the lore that The Legend of Korra adds is not contradictory to The Last Airbender, and in some cases recontextualizes things and makes it better, but retcons don't make the show bad in any capacity.
That's true. Retcons alone do not make a show objectively bad, but that doesn't mean an audience will accept them. There are some retcons that exist. When retcons are added, they may not hurt a show, but people may not like them. And the most famous example that comes to my mind is in The Phantom Menace when metachlorians were introduced.
Master, sir, I heard Yoda talking about midichlorians. I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
They live inside me.
Inside your cells, yes. And we are symbionts with them.
Symbionts?
Life forms living together for mutual advantage. Without the midichlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force. They continually speak to us, telling us the will of the Force. When you learn to quiet your mind, you'll hear them speaking to you.
I don't understand.
It was a retcon that was added to the world of Star Wars to provide a scientific explanation to the Force. And it technically worked. It didn't break anything. It didn't ruin anything. It, as you put it, used more magic to explain the current magic. And nothing was lost. But did audiences like it? No, they didn't. The concept of midichlorians has been outright despised by most Star Wars fans because it added what didn't need to be added. It tried to take what was vague and mystical and give it a value and measurement, like power levels in Dragon Ball. There's a reason they stopped using them after the Frieza arc. You're right, retcons do not inherently make a story bad, but they can suck the enjoyment out of a story for the audience because something was altered or changed that didn't need messing with. Okay, but more on that later. Back to the discussion.
The first major retcon that I can think of is Raava. Raava was introduced in Season 2 as the Avatar's light spirit, the thing that makes the Avatar the Avatar. She gives each Avatar the ability to bend all four elements, enter the Avatar state, reincarnate, and is why the Avatar is considered the bridge between humans and spirits, because the Avatar is essentially part spirit. Not really, but more or less. This is a retcon for sure, since it's expanding on pre-established lore, yet some people seem to think that this contradicts The Last Airbender, which is not the case. In The Last Airbender, Avatar Roku explains that the Avatar state is, quote,
"The Avatar's state is a defense mechanism designed to empower you with the skills and knowledge of all the past Avatars."
Legend of Korra appears to contradict this by stating that the Avatar state's power comes from Raava, but the vital mistake that a lot of people make is assuming that it must be one and not the other, but rarely do they consider that it's actually both, which is the case. The way Roku described the Avatar state was vague enough to where it could be and was expanded upon. Recall that he says it empowers you with the, quote, skills and knowledge of all past Avatars, not necessarily their combined power, which is a common misconception. It's explained in the two-part episode Beginnings that Raava fusing with Wan was what gave him not only the ability to bend all four elements at the same time, but also gave him a considerable power boost without any other Avatars before him, since he was the first. With that knowledge, it's fairly simple to figure out that Raava gives the power boost and the past Avatars give the skills and knowledge. This works because Raava is the common denominator between all Avatars, so she had a connection to their spirits, allowing the past Avatars to channel their energy and knowledge to the current Avatar, which is also why when Raava was destroyed, so was Korra's connection to her past lives, and when Raava was revived, those connections didn't come back because dying for even an instant severed those connections for good. But how come Aang didn't know about Raava? He did, just not by name. In fact, Korra is the first Avatar since Wan to have an actual dialogue with Raava while still alive, so it seems like an Avatar doesn't really get to meet Raava until after they die. The Avatar spirit is actually mentioned in The Last Airbender, in Southern Air Temple, where when Aang lashes out after finding out about Monkey Yonso's death, Katara refers to Aang's Avatar spirit.
It's his Avatar spirit!
Showing that even common people knew about Raava, but her name seems to have been lost to time. Raava was always a thing. All the Legend of Korra did was give her a name, a backstory, and a direct purpose in the story.
Okay, first, this bit right here about the spirit of the planet thing. You're right, that's not a retcon because that was never established and was not canon, so I won't argue that here. But here's what I will say. The reason I do not like Raava and Vaatu is because it greatly dumbed down the Avatar mythos for me. I'm not going to sit here and say it can't work, because it can. But much like midichlorians, it is giving an explanation to something that I didn't want explained. And I think a lot of people agree with me on that. They just don't usually know how to explain that. So I'll do my best here. When I think of the Avatar, I think about the enormous weight and responsibility the Avatar has to carry to not only keep the world in balance, but also to not be swept up in power or personal interest. Could you imagine an Avatar that became corrupt with greed, power, or personal want? Could you imagine if there was an Avatar that decided to be evil or to do wicked things? What would that look like? In fact, you pointed out yourself that Korra had the wrong idea about being the Avatar. She thought it was about fighting evil and crime and being a superhero, when there was far more to it than that. But Raava's existence actually refutes that stance to some degree. Raava is the spirit of light and peace by her own admission. Vaatu is the spirit of darkness and chaos. The two keep each other in balance, yin and yang if you will, which is obviously the idea behind them. But that's already a problem. Firstly, the Avatar being fused with Raava means that we will probably never have an evil Avatar. Raava would reject it. She wouldn't be able to be evil or allow her new life to partake in evil. Her Avatar state, since it's her power fueling it, would reject the current Avatar trying to do it. The possibility of an Avatar walking down a chaotic or dark path is highly unlikely, if not impossible, which means the Avatar will always be a perpetual superhero by nature of the fact that he or she will almost never adhere to a moral gray area. They must adhere to the morality of righteousness because the spirit with whom they are merged is the spirit of righteousness. There's no more question about the moral gray area for the Avatar. They are going to be good. good because their avatar spirit is good. Therefore, they must adhere to it. If they try to conflict with it, then they lose some of that avatar power. I think the bigger question there would be, would Raava reject them? That's the question I would ask. Secondly, Vaatu and Raava's relationship is all kinds of confusing. If they are yin and yang, which I think we can all agree they were based on, then why does Raava get weaker as Vaatu gets stronger when they're separated? By nature of the yin and yang, they keep the other in balance. If Raava gets weaker, so too must Vaatu. The two must be opposites, but they are bound by one another. Wan separated the two should have destroyed both or weakened both. There's an old saying, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow that's cast. That's yin and yang. Therefore, why is Raava weakening as Vaatu gets stronger? Unless that's not the dynamic. If that's not the dynamic, then how come Raava can't use her powers of light to combat Vaatu's corruption? How come Vaatu is just naturally more capable of messing things up than Raava is in fixing everything? See, that's the thing. If I say, well, they're based on yin and yang, so why is this happening? The classic response I've heard from people is, well, they're not actually yin and yang, so you can't literally interpret them as that. Okay, but then what are the rules? See, that's my issue. If Vaatu can so easily get more powerful once he's separated and start corrupting people, why can't Raava do the reverse and start fixing people? If she can't do that, then how was she ever able to get Vaatu in control in the first place? See, and people say, oh man, you just want explanations to everything. Well, that's not my fault because that's what this retcon is. The whole Wan series is meant to be an explanation of the Avatar and how bending came to be. The whole 2 or 3 part series, I forget how many parts it is, the whole 2 or 3 part series for Wan was meant to explain things. So I kind of want explanations for that. Here's my ultimate point. I won't say Raava being the source of power for the Avatar destroys the original show. It doesn't. It doesn't destroy it. But I do think it makes the concept of the Avatar seem that much less interesting. Even though the Spirit of the Earth idea wasn't ever canon, it makes more sense to me. An avatar is a Hindu word referring to a god who walks among mortals, a representative of the gods, if you will. It would make so much sense if the Spirit of the Earth took human form, walked among humans, learned from them, and kept the peace for the sake of the world and the spirit world. They wouldn't pick the morally righteous cause all the time because their first duty is to the preservation and prosperity of everyone, not just what is peaceful. That to me is more engaging. It's vague, but still open to a lot of interpretation and discussion. The idea that the Avatar is just a dude or gal with a magic tapeworm in their belly, and yes, that's what Raava looks like. She looks like a giant glowing tapeworm, who gives them spirit power when they're in a jam, I mean, it can work and it can open some questions, but that doesn't mean people are going to like it. In my opinion, keeping the Avatar and the Avatar state vague was the proper way to handle it. And I do think it is unbelievably ironic that people were saying about me, you just want everything explained. When in reality, I didn't want the Avatar state explained. I didn't want the history of bending explained. I wanted it kept vague because I was willing to accept the rules of this world. But since the show decided it wanted to explain it all to me, now you better fill in some of these plot holes. Now you better fill in some of these questions. So, whatever. That's just my point. Again, this isn't me refuting you because you're right. You can make the Raava and Vaatu argument work. You can make Raava work within the lore of the show. It can work. It can fit in. But I think my issue is even though it can work doesn't mean that we should add it. Or if it's going to be the case, we shouldn't have to have it explained to us.
Another retcon that people claims ruins The Last Airbender and therefore makes The Legend of Korra bad lies in these spirit portals. And I'm guessing that anybody who says this didn't watch the show at all, since the spirit portals fit like a fucking Tetris piece into The Last Airbender's lore. But okay, let's hear them out. Why do people think this? Well, if the spirit portals were there the whole time, then why didn't Aang go to one during the Siege of the North, or at any other point during the story to talk to Roku directly or to get help from the spirits, or even to make his journey to the North Pole significantly easier? If you unironically think this, I have 2 questions for you. Did you watch The Legend of Korra, and more importantly, did you watch The Last Airbender? Either you didn't watch them, or you did and weren't paying attention, because the reason these things didn't happen are obvious to anyone with half a fucking brain cell. Aang didn't use the spirit portals for several reasons outside of Mike and Brian not having thought of them yet at the time. The Legend of Korra explains that the spirit portals can only be opened by a fully realized avatar, which Aang certainly was not at the time since he couldn't control the avatar state, and that the portals can only be opened on the winter solstice, which at that point for Aang had already passed and the next one wouldn't have occurred until after the end of the series. Logistically speaking, Aang didn't even know about the spirit portals.
So is this the way to the spirit world?
And even if he did, he couldn't have gotten to the northern portal because of the blizzard and the battle taking place that would have taken priority. And even if he could physically get to the portal, he still couldn't open it, since he'd need to be able to go into the avatar state on the solstice, and the stars just didn't align for that to happen. Again, this is a retcon, but it's not contradictory, and there are reasons for why it wasn't used in the past. This is probably the fucking most bogus shit I have ever heard in my life. But in the last Airbender you can't bend in the spirit world, now they can, and this show fucking sucks. That's explained too, you fucking idiot, and you would have known that if you had paid any attention. You can't bend in the spirit world if you enter through meditation, since you don't have your physical body. If you enter the spirit world physically through one of the portals, then you can bend since you are physically there. No body means no chi paths, and therefore no bending. Get the fuck out of here with this weak ass bullshit.
Well, I personally never thought they were plot holes, I just didn't like them. I know it's personal preference, but to me the spirit world should be a world of spirits. Revolutionary concept, sure, but spirits should exist outside the plane of physical reality. Heibai, coming into the world physically as an angry spirit, worked because the forest he had been tied to had been destroyed. The connecting point between the spirit and its tie to the physical world had been upset, and thus the spirit was now taking out its rage on the physical world and dragging people from the physical world into the spirit world. And he couldn't stay in the physical world for very long. There were rules, there were limitations. But the idea that there's now literally a doorway for people and spirits to come and go, I don't know. Again, that takes some of the mysticism out of the spirits in the world they come from. Iroh will no longer be seen as an awesome dude because he's one of the few humans who could ever enter the spirit world. Now it's easily accessible for anyone brave enough to walk through. No spiritual training or status needed. To me, that weakened something that was vague and more open to audience interpretation and intrigue. Again, personal preference, I know. That's my personal stance on it. You're again right. It can work. You can make the connections, and it is well explained. But again, I think it takes something away from the show when you add this.
The spirit world itself is yet another supposed retcon, but it's really not. Some people think that what we saw of the spirit world in The Last Airbender is the extent to which it existed. It was just that swamp area with bizarre creatures running around, and for some reason, to these people, The Legend of Korra expanding on the spirit world and showing more of it is somehow a contradiction, and I'm not sure how you could think that. You saw the spirit world like once, maybe twice in The Last Airbender, and nothing in those appearances set any rules that aren't followed in The Legend of Korra. All The Legend of Korra does is just add more areas and creature diversity to the spirit world, making it feel like another world and not just one singular location. Of all the supposed retcons, this is one that straight up isn't one.
Oh, nothing to say here. I wholeheartedly agree. I do not see the spirit world as a retcon, though I will say that I think Mike and Brian might owe some copyright money to Studio Ghibli for some of their spirit designs. But again, nothing to say there. That I agree with you.
The origin of bending is something that is explained in both The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, and to many fans, the two explanations are contradictory, even though they aren't when you use even the slightest bit of brain power. In The Last Airbender, it's explained that people learned bending from the animals. Earthbenders learned from badger moles, firebenders from dragons, airbenders from the sky bison, and waterbenders from the moon, my favorite animal. The Legend of Korra seems to contradict this in the Avatar 1 episodes, where we see that people were given these abilities by the lion turtles via energy bending. There are a few explanations here, and all of them work in tandem. Firstly, it's established in The Last Airbender that lion turtles have the ability to give people bending. The Legend of Korra just expanded upon that. Secondly, while it's true that benders learned from the animals, they didn't get the abilities from them. They got the ability to bend from the lion turtles, who gave a bunch of people bending, and then straight up dipped. And over time, the lion turtles and what they gave to people was forgotten about, lost to time, so people ended up creating legends such as the story of the Cave of Two Lovers to explain the first Earthbenders, much like how many mythologies and religious belief systems in real life have stories and legends to explain various aspects of human nature. The original benders were the animals and the moon in the sense that they were the first to do it naturally, whereas humans needed to be given the power. You also gotta remember that bending is a martial art more than it is a superpower. So when they say that they, quote, learned to bend from the animals, they're referring to the martial arts techniques, the specific movements that make each bending style different.
I was able to learn earthbending, not just as a martial art.
You know, just because you can shoot fire doesn't make you a true firebender. Much like how throwing a punch doesn't make you a fucking karate master. This is also mentioned in The Last Airbender, where Katara doesn't claim to be a waterbender.
You're a waterbender.
Well, sort of. Not yet.
We see this in Beginnings, where it was Wan who developed true firebending by watching the dragons, creating the dancing dragon technique. And after the lion turtles left, the benders of each nation eventually did the same by watching the animals and the moon, which over time became the bending disciplines that we know today. So just in case you're slow, lion turtles gave people bending. They said, I'ma head out. People developed martial arts using their respective element by watching their respective animal, and the true origins of bending were lost to time and relegated to legends. They got the ability to control the elements from the lion turtles, but learns to bend from the animals.
Okay, fair enough. That's a good explanation, and I'm glad I actually have, and I'm actually glad I have 3/4 of a brain cell instead of the necessary half of one, so I actually was able to follow that. All joking aside, here's what it all comes down to. You're 100% right that none of these retcons or changes or additions ruin anything. They don't destroy the original show, and they don't break the continuity. However, to many viewers, they are oversimplifying something that we wanted to be left ambiguous. Much like midichlorians. I don't need an explanation to the origin of bending. I don't need an explanation to the origin of the Avatar. It's actually incredibly ironic, again, that I've been accused of wanting an explanation to everything, but it's the fact that the show is over-explaining things that hurts the show, in my opinion. The Wan episodes did so much harm to the Avatar world because they tried to provide an explanation and context to something that really didn't need it. In storytelling, sometimes less can be more. Do we need a 3-part series explaining to us why magic exists and who started it in Harry Potter? Do we need a scientific explanation to how the Force works in Star Wars? Do we need a documentary explaining where Pokemon came from and how they all initially evolved from animals or something like that? Some things are better left to the imagination, or at least left to the understanding that the rules of this world do not work the way ours do. Explaining to me what the Avatar is, for me, takes away the mystery and the intrigue. Explaining how humans in this world could bend the elements just feels like pandering that we didn't need. We have giant lion turtles and spirits wandering around. I'm willing to accept a few truths, okay? The idea that they learned from animals ties into the kung fu martial arts, as many kung fu styles were inspired from animals like the snake, crane, monkey, praying mantis, and the style that I myself trained in, tiger style. And yes, I trained in various martial arts growing up. Still do, still love it. But that's part of what drew me to the bending styles in Legend of Korra. But we'll talk about that in a later video, I'm sure. Look, I'll end with this note. You're right. Again, the retcons don't destroy the original or the current show. But what they do for some of us is hurt the wonder of the world's lore. In their attempt to help explain things to us, they pandered. In an attempt to add lore, they forced us to ask more questions and make the vague and interesting mundane and unimpressive. The Avatar's no longer a mysterious figure that could be considered a god among humans or a representative of the spirits. It's just a dude with a magic tapeworm that grants him power when he needs it. In no way making him special or unique. Wan could have been replaced with anyone. It just so happened that he was the one who came across Raava. I don't know, that just to me seems incredibly fortunate, not in any way planned or ordained. I don't know, to me that hurt it. I know all of that is just my subjective opinion, but I have a sneaky feeling that there are lots of others who feel similarly. I disagree with those who say it ruins anything, but I sympathize with those who say it didn't make the show more engaging either. So, again, point to you, you're right. Anyone who says that the retcons ruin the show, yeah, y'all are definitely wrong. It didn't ruin the show. Because think about it, if it really ruined the show, then you wouldn't go back and rewatch Avatar The Last Airbender, would you? Even with all this knowledge about The Legend of Korra, I can still watch and enjoy Avatar The Last Airbender. The show is not ruined for me. But I think I can agree with those who say, even though it doesn't ruin anything, it doesn't help anything either. In many ways, it dumbed down what we wanted to be left mysterious and mature. But that's just my point. All right, guys. Well, that wraps up this video. And the next part, I believe, is about bending and martial arts. Oh man, I'm looking forward to this. I'm really excited about this. As a martial artist myself, who has spent a long time studying in the martial arts, and I loved the original Avatar The Last Airbender for adding martial arts into the bending styles. This is going to be a lot of fun. I cannot wait to look at this part. I'm going to have a lot of opinions on this. I'm going to maybe I'll add some of my own personal experiences with the martial arts. I'm really interested to see what's said. But anyway, guys, that's it for this. Please don't go harassing Matt for anything that I've said or that he's said. This video is meant in good faith. I really appreciate Matt's fairness with me and his Twitch responses. And again, guys, I'm always open to learning. I'm always open to gaining new understandings. I hope that y'all understand that. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't already, and go subscribe to Matt if you haven't yet. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.